This is the follow-up from the middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, bringing more of your voices into the conversation each week. And we're following up today on our show where we were joined by CNN's Fareed Zakaria to talk about Iran, Ukraine, and America's role in the world. And we didn't get to a number of things I wanted to talk about because there was so much to discuss. So good thing we do the follow-up, and good thing we have Dan Baer with us now. He is Senior Vice President for Policy Research and Director of the Europe Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and a former U.S. Ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Dan, welcome back.
It's great to be back with you.
Well, and as we record this, a lot of things have happened. First of all, President Trump has just backed off another threat to bomb Iran, saying that there's movement on an agreement to end the war, end the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. But also, and this almost seemed like it wasn't related, but it actually is related, the U.S. just stepped in to prop up the Japanese yen, which is at a 40-year low against the dollar, in part because of high energy prices due to the war in Iran. What is your sense of the scale of this war at this point and its global implications?
The global implications have been playing out from the beginning, and obviously stepping in to support the yen is a way of trying to ease the burden on Japan for these high energy prices. But we should note that those high prices are being felt almost everywhere and elsewhere in Asia, too. Indonesia had to tell people not to drive to work because they were worried about oil shortages. They've been canceling social programs in order to make up for the lost revenue that is now being dedicated to oil. So the implications have been playing out, affecting many of America's closest partners for many months now. But this latest intervention is obviously a sign that things were getting tough on the Japanese, and Trump is trying to stem the bleeding, as it were. I think it is also a lesson that kind of the knock-on effects are going to increasingly be hard for him to contain. Obviously, he's very focused on the effects here at home because of the electoral pressures. But the longer this goes on, and it won't end in a day, the longer this goes on, the more we're going to see those cascading effects.
Right. It's been 5 months already since the start of the war. Fareed Zakaria made a little bit of news on our show. I asked him if there was any chance that the U.S. could end up in a better position after the war than it was in before. Listen to this.
We can't get back to a better position because, frankly, we essentially lost the war. It's not. The Iranians have suffered a lot. Their military is in very bad shape. Their ballistic missiles are in, their launchers have been destroyed, though they clearly have some left. But basically the way to think about this is, what was the objective of the war? Fundamentally, it became regime change and all that kind of thing. It was to get Iran to do what we wanted it to do, which was sign on the dotted line on eliminating its nuclear program, eliminating the nuclear enriched fuel, what President Trump always calls the nuclear dust, eliminating its ballistic missiles, eliminating its support for proxy regimes. We've done, not only have we not achieved any of those goals, we're not even trying to achieve those goals anymore. We are now trying to do one thing. The ceasefire was about one thing, opening the Strait of Hormuz, which was, of course, open before the war.
Do you agree with that, Dan Baer, that we have already lost the war in Iran?
Yeah, I've been saying for several months that this is a strategic defeat for the United States. We are objectively worse off than we were when we started, not least because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which was always a possibility but had never been done in practice. And I expect that for the foreseeable future, Iran will have some say over the strait. Whatever deal is negotiated, there are going to be added costs, either in the form of insurance payments because it's a higher risk proposition to transit the strait, or through actual tolling. I don't think we know what the deal is that will eventually open that, but whatever the deal is, I expect that it will entail higher costs for transit.
I want to get to some comments from our listeners. We got this note from Laura in Illinois who says, my grandson has been someplace in Israel for 4.5 months. He's Air Force. We do talk and text. How are families supposed to trust that rational decisions are being made to bring all our military home? I want him home. We are beyond proud of him. Now, Dan, there are some 50,000 U.S. troops stationed around the Middle East right now. Should they feel confident that rational decisions are being made when it comes to their well-being and U.S. objectives?
I mean, we should look at the decision to go to war in the first place, which may have been rational, but has proven to be bad. And, that bad decision, I understand why it gives great concern to the families of our military. It is, again, the United States has lost more than it has gained through this war. We haven't even talked about the depletion of our own stocks of weapons, which leave us less prepared for other crises that might come to pass. It's a staggering statistic that in the first 3 days of this war, the United States and its partners and allies in the Gulf used more Patriot missiles than Ukraine has used in 4 years of war. And that was 1.5 times the annual output of the United States. So we blew through 1.5 years worth of production in 3 days. This also is a cost of the war, and it leaves obviously our military less prepared for other crises that might develop that aren't wars of choice.
And does it affect Ukraine directly in the sense that because we've depleted these munitions that we can't sell or give them to Ukraine to fight the war against Russia?
It does affect Ukraine directly. Ukraine has certainly been a loser in this war, both because the oil prices rising gives some comfort to Putin because he gets more revenue, and also because the depletion of weapons and other military equipment by the United States and partners makes a smaller pool to draw from for those who want to support Ukraine in a war that was not its choice, and a war that we should be supporting Ukraine to help drive to a just conclusion on the battlefield. And we don't have as much capacity to do that because we're engaging in wars of choice.
What about to the question that we had asked our listeners in the original show, which was about America's role in the world? What do you think that the war in Iran in particular has done to America's image, or just sort of the perception of what America's role should be by other countries?
I think 2 things. One, President Trump ran for election saying that he was going to curtail what he saw as 2 decades of American presidents being too engaged in wars overseas, and that he was going to not do that. This obviously is a 180 on that commitment, and I think the world is watching and wondering what he and future administrations will do in terms of the U.S. role in the world. It had been believed that there was a popular support for a pullback from certainly direct kinetic military engagements, and I think people are watching for that. I think the second piece is the cascading effects, the economic effects of this war, which have damaged America's reputation, because you can imagine that if you are a farmer in India or Indonesia or Peru and you are paying more to get your goods to market because the Americans have gone to war in Iran, it doesn't make you think that the Americans are working to help make sure that you can put food on the table for your family.
Let's get to another voicemail from one of our listeners. Listen to this caller.
My name is Christopher McDonald, and I am calling from Clarksville, Tennessee. Why has nothing been done, or what is being done with the fact that we've gone well past the, I believe it's 60-day limit for a president to declare war without Congress's approval? Why are we ignoring that rule? Are we just giving the president carte blanche to make war?
So, Dan, this involves the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which basically says that if a president goes in with military action somewhere that's unauthorized by Congress, that president has 60 days to get authorization from Congress or cease hostilities. In this case, the White House has been saying, well, when there was a temporary ceasefire, that stopped the clock, then it restarts again. It's kind of legally questionable. But are you surprised, A, that Congress hasn't authorized this war, and B, that they haven't pushed back more on the fact that he's kind of skirting the rules here?
I mean, not only have they not authorized the war, they passed actually a resolution saying that it was not authorized back in June with the help of several Republicans. And so I think the assessment from Congress was that this is not an authorized war. Obviously, this is one of several places where the Trump administration has been pursuing legally dubious actions. But I think there has been an outcry from Congress that congressional members, both senators and members of the House, are hearing increasingly from their constituents that this war is adding to an already difficult environment in terms of affordability. The latest that I've seen was that the war is just in oil prices alone. The war has added about $500 a year to every American family's expenses. That's a lot of money. And so I think you're going to continue to hear members of Congress calling for a wind down of the war, whatever the technicalities that the president and the White House may offer. Those technicalities in terms of legal hijinks won't do anything to solve the problems that ordinary people are feeling until the war is wound down.
Well, stand by because we've got more to discuss after a short break. I'll be right back with Dan Baer of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Welcome back to the follow-up. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'm joined by Dan Baer, Senior Vice President for Policy Research and Director of the Europe Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Dan, what does all of this, Iran, Ukraine, mean for China, which, as we know, would love to take control of Taiwan and has just watched the U.S. take control of Venezuela and kill the leadership of Iran?
I mean, there are multiple things going on that the Chinese are paying attention to. There's been news in recent weeks that the Chinese are shipping resupplies to Iran. So obviously they're quite happy to see the Americans ensnared in a trap of our own laying, in their view. But I imagine that one of the big lessons they're taking from this is just how much the change in modern warfare, particularly drones, has given advantage to asymmetric actors.
Right.
So, you know, Iran is objectively not as powerful as the United States, and yet the United States has experienced a strategic defeat in a military engagement with Iran. Similarly, in Ukraine, many people, obviously, we've been saying for a long time that many people that Ukraine would lose in the first few days, maybe a week or two in that war. And yet Putin, who has a much larger military, much more money, much more equipment, has found it frustratingly difficult to make any progress over many months now. And so I think the Chinese are probably thinking, what lessons should we take about whether we can guarantee victory in a military engagement? And they're probably thinking about other ways of asserting their power. Obviously they have not been visibly active in the Russia-Ukraine conflict,
right.
But certainly there's no way that Putin could continue to prosecute this war without the support that he's getting from China, particularly on the equipment and weapons front.
I'm so glad that you brought up drones, because I was thinking about this the other day, and you talk about asymmetric warfare. Against the United States is spending, millions and millions and millions of dollars with things that shoot the drones down, but the drones are cheap and they're easy to make. And I was thinking about it in the context of 9/11, where it was like, suicide bombers could actually take down the biggest buildings and kill so many people in the United States, but they have to kill themselves to do that. With the drones, they don't even have to do that. They just have to destroy the drone. It's even easier in some ways for somebody to have asymmetric warfare against the United States with a drone than with a person.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think our air defense systems would probably be triggered by something that was not carrying 300 innocent lives in a different way than an airplane. That posed a special problem, not only because the suicide bombers were on the planes, but also because innocent passengers were on the planes. And so that made it harder to deal with them. But it's absolutely the case that the drones are cheap. They're increasingly capable. The innovation cycle on these drones is now, according to some of my sources in Ukraine, it's down to a matter of a few weeks, less than a month, where you're seeing the next generation innovation from the battlefield to production of drones that have different capabilities that can get around defenses, et cetera. And the Ukrainians in particular, are showing themselves to be quite adept. You've probably seen the latest news that Ukraine is putting the pinch on Russian citizens by blowing up warehouses that supply their equivalent of Amazon. And that's a way that you can destroy a bunch of household goods that doesn't kill a person, but it does make the effects of the war show up in ordinary people's kitchen tables and living rooms.
Let's get to another voicemail from one of our listeners. Listen to this caller.
Hi, my name is Amar. I am calling from Virginia. Is it possible that this war will accelerate that from a unipolar world to a multipolar world, which the world was heading anyway? And there'll be serious consequences with relationship between U.S. and Israel. we are already seeing it in many, many aspects.
Dan, what do you think about that? Do you think that we are moving more toward a multipolar world with different power centers?
Yeah, there were two parts to that question. So the first one about whether this is accelerating the move to a multipolar world. Certainly the relative power of the United States has waxed and waned over the last half century. So it has relatively declined in terms of the overall share of GDP that we have, although it's somewhat stable in recent years because the United States has grown faster than other industrialized economies. So, the United States is still the most powerful single country in the world. That doesn't mean we live in a unipolar world. I don't think we're moving to a multipolar world. It's very difficult to identify the other poles of that world. I think what's scarier is that if we're moving away from a unipolar world, we're moving actually to a world where there's no single actor that is willing to underwrite the rules of the game, that is willing to enforce the rules of the game in terms of international politics. And I do think that that is part of the danger of diminishing U.S. power voluntarily, which I think a lot of the actions of the Trump administration have done. They've taken on our allies rather than working more closely with them in order to ensure that the United States can continue to lead and problem solve on things that no other country can. And that's a real risk for us going forward. On the question on Israel, it's absolutely the case that we've seen through polling that the domestic politics around the question of the United States' relationship with Israel have changed dramatically in the last 3 years. And I expect that that's something that we'll see play out in the 2028 election cycle here, and that will have an impact in policy in the long run.
Well, and some people are going to be listening to this or watching this podcast after the primary election in Michigan, where Israel is absolutely front and center on the Democratic side and the U.S. relationship with Israel in that race. Let's get to one more caller. Listen to this.
Hi, my name is Haya from Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, America. We need to wake up to all these useless, unnecessary, and devastating wars to America's reputation. We are doing this to support Israel, because Israel's trying to get rid of all the powers that be. I am no fan of Iran, but we have no right really to go after a sovereign nation that's been following international laws, because we decided to. And I forget how much every airplane costs or every bomb, while Americans here can't cover their health insurance, can't cover their food, and we can't even claim the higher moral ground because we are working closely with countries like Saudi Arabia.
I'm not sure it's fair for her to say that Iran was following international law, Dan, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's important to separate out the goals or the legitimate objectives from the method. And so it is a legitimate objective to want Iran not to have nuclear weapons. It is not a regime that follows international law. It actively supports terrorism. It has a terrible human rights record. It's a good thing to have Iran not have a nuclear weapon. It's a good thing to have Iran stop supporting terrorist proxies in the region. It's a good thing to have some curbs on Iran's ballistic missile program. All of that would make the region safer. Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. The Iranian regime is terrible and deplorable. The question is whether a U.S. war was the right way to try to solve that, or whether diplomacy still had a chance to work. Diplomacy that the Trump administration itself was carrying out. And so I think we have to separate the means from the end. The ends are good. The ends are good goals. The means have been unsatisfactory and have actually set us back strategically. And I understand the frustration that American voters feel seeing a very expensive war waged that is driving up prices while they're having trouble making ends meet here at home.
Okay, so we've talked about Iran, we've talked a little bit about Ukraine, we've talked about China, I mentioned Venezuela. Is there anything that you're following that's sort of flying under the radar you think we should be focusing on, that people should be paying attention to globally?
I mean, I guess one of the things that I've been curious about is who is going to, this goes to the caller's question about kind of moving away from a unipolar world. The United States has not been actively engaged in the way that we have in the last 30 years in the multilateral system under this administration. One of the issues that has not reached the newspapers as much as I would have thought it would have is the war in Sudan. The war in Sudan has displaced close to 15 million people. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives. Depending on how you calculate it, there are up to 500,000 excess child deaths because of malnutrition. And this is something that in a different era, the United States might have been at the forefront of rallying the world to try to confront. And I think it's off the radar screen, both because of the perils of prejudice connected to geography, as well as because of an absence of U.S. leadership. And there doesn't seem to be anybody else who's stepping into the breach to kind of make sure that there's an international system that can respond to a devastating tragedy like what we're seeing unfold in Sudan.
So you're the director of the Europe program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Where are the Europeans on the Sudan issue? Or are they just so wrapped up right now with Ukraine that they can't, take that on as well?
I mean, they say the right things. They do contribute to the fundraising that the UN does to help deliver food aid, et cetera. But it takes not only the kind of resources, but it takes the capacity to rally the world to assert international leadership. And this goes back to what I was saying. There really is no other actor besides the United States that has the capacity to do that, to marry hard power, resources, what used to be a deep well of soft power that has fast been eroded, but a deep well of soft power to convene the world to solve real thorny challenges. And so they're in the right place kind of spiritually, or they're on the right side, but they don't have the capacity, or they haven't demonstrated the capacity to step forward and do something that the United States used to do.
Okay, the final question is your prediction about anything. Now, what I realize now as I'm about to ask you for that is that we could have gone back to the first time you were on the follow-up and looked at your prediction and see if it came true, but we didn't think of that before this. So anyway, what's your next prediction, Dan?
Gratefully, you don't do that, because that way your listeners can believe that all of my predictions come true.
Right.
My prediction this time is that in 2028, the United States will have an independent candidate for president who will meet or exceed the performance of Teddy Roosevelt, which was, I think, around 27%.
In 2028?
Yeah.
Wow. That would be very interesting. I mean, I guess if it's going to happen, this is a moment when the parties kind of are in a little disarray on both sides. We're going to be talking about that in the next couple of weeks, but fascinating. Dan Baer, Senior Vice President for Policy Research and Director of the Europe Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Dan, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for listening to The Follow-Up. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next 2 weeks are going to be about domestic politics. This week, we're asking, what would you change about the Democratic Party? Next week, we're asking, what would you change about the Republican Party? Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I am Jeremy Hobson, and I will talk to you soon.